Hi, my name's Andy Jackson and I am a poet. This is World Poetry Day, so of course I'll now read you a poem. Okay, this poem is quite new and it's based on a true story. In fact, I was actually sitting not too far from where I am now, just outside there. And the first line is the title. When a line of determined ants carries away my nail clippings, I remember this pale skin will be taken by the sky. My knees are already dedicated to the cracked earth. Lungs possessed by the ghost gums along the railway line, my inner ear by shivers and nothingness. These feet belong to some restless, prayerful abstraction. Language waits to inherit my expressive fingers. Shares in my larynx are held by everyone I love. My blood, though, is anyone's. Cloud drift, mould bloom, wormhole, the waxing moon, the cat's sensitive chin, all hold interests in this flesh. My leaning tower of vertebrae can go to the highest bidder, these tear ducts to the lowest. Sometimes it seems lost property holds my tongue, but who owns these elbows, this nose, these lymph nodes? Some valves and tissues will be given to people waiting patiently in a line. My chest cavity has given itself to the song of shy birds, and these eyes to the claim of your eyes. Okay, well, the most recent publication I've been in is this book, Growing Up Disabled in Australia. It's a collection of essays by people, well, the name explains it, telling their story about what it was like for them to grow up in this country as a disabled person. Actually, a couple of years ago, the editor, Carly Findlay, put a call out, particularly through a network of disabled writers and artists and people, asking for submissions. The idea came through Black Ink, who had done some other anthologies, growing up queer, growing up African, growing up Asian, growing up Aboriginal in Australia. All fantastic anthologies, and I can't remember whose idea it was, whether it was Carly's first or Black Ink's first. I think it might have been Carly's. And yeah, it's proved to be a really rich idea. It was going to come out, I think, about a year ago, but when the pandemic hit, the realization was that we really wanted some launches, we wanted events, we wanted to meet people and get out and about, and that really wasn't going to be possible last year. So it's just been released now, but some of the essays have been in existence for quite a while. Look, from what I hear, it was very difficult to choose. There were hundreds of essays submitted, and I think many that perhaps, hopefully, will get another existence outside the book. So my discussions with Carly that I've seen and talked with her, she's felt like she really wanted a diversity of voices because the disability community is incredibly diverse. So she wanted a whole lot of different styles of writing. There's some straight essays, but there's also some visual work. There's some poems, different kinds of writing as well, very poetic stuff, some really direct work. There's some really hilarious pieces as well. A lot very touching and moving too. But there's a diversity of people's experiences as well, so different ages. So you can see how disability has changed in terms of public perception over the decades. But you can also see the great struggles that people still have. And all different kinds of experiences too. So it's incredibly diverse, and I think that's been one of her great skills as an editor, to bring all those different voices together and have a kind of chorus effect where somehow there's a collective sense and collective spirit in the anthology, but still each one is really different. I've only had a handful of essays published. Traditionally I'm a poet and I'll will always be a poet, I think. So I've had a couple of books out of collections of poems, and I have another one coming out later on this year. But yeah, this direction for me is a little bit different, and which is exciting. It's exciting to write in prose. Why I write is, on the one hand, really, really simple, and also really, really complex too. I began writing really because I'd spent all my kind of young life and adult life being aware of my physical difference, being aware of being looked at and stared at. And that gets you thinking about why that happens. It makes you self-conscious, it makes you actually think about the dynamic of what it means to be different in the world. So partly I write to try to sort of make sense of it, to try to understand it, and to get some sense of agency about expressing who I am, so that people can, I guess, not so much know who I am, because partly we're all mystery, all of us, but to get a sense of pleasurable uncertainty for a reader, you know, where they just sort of go, oh, maybe I don't quite know. And which I think is a similar thing to what happens in this book, that people can sort of suddenly go, oh, maybe things are different or more complicated than I thought they were. So there's that. I think I also write to try to explore affinity with other people, or solidarity, connection, community, whatever that is. You know, writing to me is totally solitary when you're doing it, but it's always unfinished if it's just sitting there on a page or in a file. I want it to be out there in the world and making little ripples. 2020 was a year for me of very, very little writing. I had a few poems commissioned where people requested me to write poems for them, which I did and enjoyed. But mostly that sense of wanting to write just couldn't, it never resulted in, or hardly ever resulted in work. Actual writing. For me, I think, and I think this has happened to a lot of writers, there was just too much background distraction and stress and grief as well. I also lost my mum about 2 years ago, so after that I wasn't writing much anyway. And then the pandemic hit, and it just became this sense of, all right, maybe it's a pause. So it doesn't quite feel good not writing, but it feels appropriate on some level, or it feels okay. It's fine to not write. I don't really believe in that idea that if you're a writer, you have to be writing every day. Some people do, but I take a much more flexible idea. I think part of writing is just living, going for a walk, talking with your friends, being involved in a community. That's writing as much as anything else, because it's feeding yourself. It's a good question. I do consider myself a full-time writer now. If I include, my income source, I guess, is mainly through teaching and mentoring, creative writing, poetry. So yeah, pretty much the time I spend my day thinking about writing or looking at other people's writing, mentoring, workshopping, networking. Yeah, so I do consider myself a full-time writer. Growing up disabled in Australia, which I really loved. I can say that because I'm just a minor part among it. It's really a transformative kind of book, and I want to go back and read it again and again. The other thing that really struck me recently is, and this is a couple of years old, but Rick Morton's book, 100 Years of Dirt, was just hilarious, but incredibly devastating as well. It's actually, I think, quite rare for there to be books that are kind of from a working class or not a middle-class background, and that book really brings that into the fore, especially, outside the city, queer man, just a fantastic book, really worth reading, and I'm going to track down his next one, which I think is out soon. My reading apparently started before I was at school and before I was at kindergarten. Apparently the story goes, I don't even remember this, but apparently the story goes I was reading to the other kids in kindergarten. So I can't recall what started me reading. I know I read a lot of Dr. Seuss when I was a very young boy. I know I read a lot of fantasy and horror when I was a teenager. I read a lot of poetry really in my 20s. So of course Sylvia Plath, Gregory Orr, Adrienne Rich, Judith Wright, Robert Adamson, a lot of the really iconic poets working in that kind of lyrical mode and personal poetry. But I've also, I can't pin down one book. It's just been this strange evolution, I think. I also think for a lot of people, it's, you build your own canon, you build your own kind of idiosyncratic collection of books. So I guess I've done that, and I've tried not to worry too much about what the big influences are, because they shift and change as the years go on. I do have another collection of poems due out late this year called Human Looking. That was written, I guess, between 2015 and 2019. So exciting book. I think they all say this, but I think it's the one I'm most excited about yet. Hopefully that happens for all of us. We keep going and going, and the next one's better and better. But yeah, Human Looking, I'm really excited by. That's the main thing that's coming up, and obviously still we're doing interviews and discussions around growing up disabled as well. There's a panel discussion at the Castlemaine State Festival coming up very soon, which will be exciting. That's with myself, fellow writer Eliza Hull, and the editor Carly Findlay, so that'll be great. It's a sheer pleasure, always great to talk to booksellers. Yeah, it's beautiful, thanks.